Welcome to the Zoe LifeCast. You know, most people don't wake up one day and then just stop living. It happens quite gradually. It's a little less energy, a little more anxiety, less confidence, and before we know it, we just get through every day. And this podcast is about looking at those things that get in the way of living fully. The science, the stories, the conversations, the habits, the relationships, the breakthroughs. Here we talk about the things that help us to understand ourselves better, understand how to live more fully. Because, you know, life is never meant to just be endured. It's meant to be lived abundantly. So welcome. I've got Michelle with me in the studio here today, and I'm quite excited to have this conversation with you. It's a very important topic. It affects a lot of women, and I don't think we talk about this enough. So Michelle, let's get going. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the meat of it.
Sure. So my name is Michelle, as you said, and I am a medical doctor that's specialised in clinical pathology. And I am now in a very exciting new phase of my life. I've started my own practice, and I am hoping to be able to help women with what we've been talking about, what you mentioned in your introduction, to live life abundantly, live life to the full, and just to be able to rediscover themselves, and to where one has a lack of energy, struggling with certain things at this phase of life many of us find ourselves in, to be able to be themselves, to get back to who they are. And when you feel like you've lost yourself a little bit, to find yourself again, and really just to be able to live your life abundantly. So that's really something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm excited to be starting this new exciting new chapter where I've started my practice, Bloom Metabolic and Aesthetics, and I am focusing a little bit more on a functional integrative medicine and some aesthetic medicine, which is very exciting for me.
So Michelle, who were you before Bloom? Just give us a little bit of a background on what you've been up to, where you come from, and just so that we get to know you a little bit better.
So I grew up here in the beautiful Menopause Strand. We moved here as a family when I was about 4 years old, and my family has been living here ever since. My sisters and I recently all moved back to Menopause Strand. I've been back here since 2023. With my little boy, and it is very nice to be living here in this beautiful seaside place, where I used to run as a child. He can now run around, and it's wonderful. So yes, and then I went to school here in the area. Went to university at the University of Cape Town. After that, moved to the Northern Cape for my internship. Came back for my community service. Worked in Atlantis for the year. Then I decided to sail the 7 seas as a cruise ship doctor for a year. And then I decided to specialize in pathology. So that's also a journey that I've been on. Went into pathology, not really thinking that I would be wanting to do clinical medicine again. But, you know, sometimes these things, life takes you on interesting journeys and twists and turns, and yes, and then I decided, after working for 6 years for a large laboratory, I decided to leave that job. I'm now still working in laboratory medicine, but it's for a smaller lab. And then, yes, decided to start my practice, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a while.
And what first drew you into medicine? I mean, we all, you in school, what made you want to get into medicine at all? So
I am a person of faith, and my mom encouraged myself and my sisters to pray about what we should study one day. So in early high school, I was praying about what I should do, and I felt God tell me I must do medicine. And at the time, I was very skeptical because I thought, I don't like blood, and I don't really like the thought of, a dead body. So I actually just prayed and said, if he wants me to do medicine, then he will have to take those fears away from me. And he did. So I decided at the age of 15 that I'd like to be a doctor. And yes, the doors opened for me to study medicine through UCT. And then, when I started doing medicine, I think I started with the idea that everyone has, that you want to help people. And of course, that's, what doctors do. That's our primary function.
Yes.
But, obviously things change and interests develop over time as you study and as you go along. And then I realized, I really like the science behind it. So I think that's what drew me to pathology. Just, the science behind it, and understanding how the body works, understanding disease processes. So that's sort of what took me into medicine. Medicine is a very broad field, as we know. There's doctors can do fulfill so many different roles, and so yes, it's a very fascinating career path.
So you mentioned functional medicine. Want to give me a little bit of a better understanding of what that is? What do you mean by that? Just for the audience as well, people that haven't heard of it. What is functional medicine, and why is it important?
Yeah, so medicine in the traditional sense is very good at diagnosing disease, and tends to look at disease and organ systems in isolation. Not always, that is a bit of a generalization, but functional medicine's focus and point is really just to, instead of just saying this is, answering the question what is wrong, it's asking why is this happening. It also tries to look for the root cause, so let's really dig down and find out what is at the bottom of the symptoms, what is causing this constellation of symptoms. Also tries to look at everything holistically, so looking at the body as a whole, not looking just at your kidneys in isolation, or your heart or your brain, but looking at them all together, because everything is connected. It's really also going on a journey with the patient, which you can argue that is medicine, but the traditional way of doing medicine is very short consultations, where you can't really get to the bottom of things in a very short space of time. Of course, I'm not criticizing other ways that people practice medicine. There's a role for every type of practitioner. But what I like about functional medicine is that we are looking for a root cause. It ties quite a lot in with laboratory medicine when we troubleshoot. We try to look for a root cause. So that is what I like about it, and I like the fact that I'm able to journey with the patient to really help them just reach their full health potential and wellness potential.
I was wondering about pathology and the link between functional medicine and pathology, so I guess as a layman, we don't always understand how these things interlinked. So what I hear you say is that it is that troubleshooting sort of aspect of it where that. And I find it quite interesting that a pathologist, goes into functional medicine. So tell me a little bit about, just that link and maybe explain that a little bit more for the audience.
Yes. So, I certainly didn't think I would find myself where I am now. When I decided to specialize, I thought that I would be doing my specialty and I'll be focusing on that. But, I think when one is on your own quest for health and for wellness, then you start to realize that there are so many different ways of approaching things.
Yes.
And I just found that it wasn't really answering all the questions that I had for myself. And I noticed that there's quite a big need in the community and, amongst my patients, also just to have a better understanding of how their bodies are working, what is going on in their bodies, especially in a changing season like the perimenopause or menopause, to fully understand what is going on, and not just, to try and look for to put a plaster on a wound, but to actually find out what is causing the wound in the first place. So with pathology, traditionally pathology is the study of disease, really. And functional medicine is obviously looking for the root cause, understanding why we are in the position we are, what is causing the disease state, and using some alternative ways to address it. Not necessarily just looking at traditional medications, looking at some supplementation, addressing lifestyle things like muscle mass and metabolic health, and not just addressing, so many times people have symptoms, they feel a certain way, they don't feel well, but their blood tests are normal. But normal doesn't necessarily mean optimal. And I think
that's interesting.
I think having an understanding of laboratory testing also gives me a little bit of an extra insight into interpreting results and knowing the limitations that laboratory tests have as well. So I think it's a little bit of a unique position where I'm able to interpret testing quite more fully.
Yeah, I guess looking at averages across a population of people is not really giving you the full picture. That's interesting. And you mentioned that you were in your own sort of personal journey. You want to talk to us about what that personal journey is, and if you're willing to share?
Yes. So I when I think about, so my big personal journey was mostly related to my weight. And when I look back objectively across my life, I didn't have a weight problem across my whole life, but I always thought I did. And I think that speaks a lot to the society that we grow up in. We are quite fixated on weight and having the ideal weight and feeling like being a certain weight is going to bring you happiness and success and love and everything that you're looking for. Whereas we know that that's not true. You can be, and I actually experienced that for myself. Even at some of the times where I was at my heaviest, I was very happy. So it wasn't actually related. And I quickly came to the realization that being at an ideal weight isn't necessarily what brings happiness, but it certainly does put you at risk for disease. Being overweight, you can be overweight and be healthy. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. But generally speaking, when you carry around extra weight, you are putting extra pressure on your joints. Yeah. You are placing yourself at risk for diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cardiovascular disease remains one of the biggest causes of death internationally, globally. And, being a mom made me realize, I want to be able to be there for my child for as much of his life as I possibly can be, where it's in my control. So I also lost my own mom in 2024, and that also just kind of really brought home to me that I really want to do everything from my side that I can to be healthy. And yes, all my laboratory tests, apart from a little bit of cholesterol being raised, which you can expect when you are overweight, I looked healthy, on my laboratory test, but I knew that I'm still at risk for disease. And so I decided for me, the journey the weight loss journey took me to having bariatric surgery. So I had that last year, about a year ago. I had my bariatric surgery. And I've lost quite a significant amount of weight. And that is, of course, a very, very nice feeling to lose weight. It's one always does feel good. But what I've been enjoying the most is the amount of energy that I have again after losing the weight. You don't sometimes realize that you have low energy until you have energy again. Then you realize, wow, actually definitely was struggling with my energy. And I was starting to find like I was having some joint pain. It was harder for me to exercise. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I can see how much easier it is for me to exercise. It's so much easier to make healthy choices and live in a much more healthy and fulfilling way. So yes, that's what sort of took me. That's sort of the health, in a nutshell, the health journey that I've been on. I also like to read up and explore, and just also being on social media, you also see so much that people are also looking for alternative ways to look for health. People are seeking,
people are desperate,
and people are desperate to feel like themselves, to feel like they used to feel. And weight is one of the things that often brings people to me. People will say, the biggest problem that they have is their weight. But often if weight, and sometimes it's maybe serves as a little bit of a spotlight, but
yes, it sort of opens up the need for a conversation.
It opens up the need for a conversation, but ultimately we end up focusing a lot less on the weight and the weight loss than we do on
everything
else.
Yeah.
So sometimes people identify that as it's sort of the easy thing to identify for someone, because they're not fitting comfortably into their clothing, or they have a serious weight problem. Their weight is at a level that puts them at risk for disease. And of course, I often say to people, we will get to the weight, but the weight will sort of sort itself out along the way.
You just have to get to the underlying problem. Hey? I'm so excited that you are moving into this area, and that you're doing this in an area close to me, because I just find that on my sort of journey, we need help, and as I said in my intro, it sort of happens gradually. You just wait. It's not like it's one day. It's this slow decline in so many things, and you actually don't know what's going on with you. And I think it just helps to also be able to talk about it and to say, this is how I'm feeling. This is I don't know, because sometimes we also don't have words for it. And sitting on the other side of the desk, you get to a doctor and you go like, I just don't feel like myself. I don't know what's wrong. So it's I can see that you've got a lot of compassion and that you really want to help people.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, let's talk a little bit more about Bloom. What I would like to understand is, and it comes off the back of my own sort of journey, is why do you think women arrive in their 40s just feeling like nothing is cooperating anymore?
Yes, so I mean, it is because of the phase of life that you enter into in your late 30s, 40s, and that we call perimenopause. So I think a lot of women think of menopause as the time that their periods stop, and they know that that's associated with a drop in hormone levels. But what I think a lot of people don't realize it's not sort of a nice, slow, gradual decrease in hormones till one day you don't have any. It can be more like a roller coaster where the hormone levels actually can fluctuate quite wildly. And it can start in your 30s. For most women, it starts in their early 40s and can last up to 15 years. So it's a long period of time that you have where your hormone levels are fluctuating. You're not understanding why you suddenly have mood swings, why you suddenly don't have patience with your children and your family, why you are extra irritable, why your moods have changed, why you feel depressed one minute and happy the next, why you can't sleep anymore, why you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, why your weight suddenly isn't responding the way that it used to, when you would be able to, in the past, you would be able to change your diet slightly or increase your exercise, and you would be able to, get rid of the last few kilos that you've been trying to shed, where suddenly now this isn't working anymore. And you just don't feel like yourself. And it almost makes women feel like they're going a little bit crazy. I have so many patients that sit in front of me and they say, I feel like I'm losing my mind, but like I need someone to almost tell me I'm not going crazy, and it's like the truth is you're not going crazy. It's the way that our hormones, every cell in the female body, so all of our organs have estrogen receptors. And if you think about it, our brains have estrogen receptors, our hearts, our muscles, And as we now start losing estrogen, it starts to decline, those organ systems are going to feel it. They're going to feel that they don't have it. I mean, progesterone is the other big female hormone, and that's also important. A decrease in progesterone can also make you feel terrible. It can make that you don't sleep as well, or you wake up and you can't get back to sleep. And sleep is something that is so incredibly important for overall health maintenance. And if you don't sleep, then your hormones also, your cortisol and your body's whole stress response doesn't work optimally. Then on top of that, the chronic stress of lifestyle, it just is aggravated by not sleeping well. When you haven't slept well, you also you crave more sugary things because your blood sugar is maybe a little bit less stable, and you want to snack, and so it just has such a knock-on effect, and a lot of these things are because of hormonal changes that we experience in the perimenopause phase that we're in.
So what would you say are some of the first sort of signs that women should be looking out for?
I think some of the signs that you start to notice is, people also think that it kind of like starts when your periods start to change, but that's quite a bit further down the line. Often it can be subtle things like you don't sleep as well, you don't have as much energy, you feel a little bit forgetful, you sort of grasp for words.
Yes,
what we would call
I had major brain fog.
Yeah, and you just you start to think, wow, you feel almost like for women who've been pregnant, you feel a little bit like how you did when you were pregnant, a little bit of that, what they call the pregnancy brain. Whereas that's from increased hormones, around the time of pregnancy, but this is, as your hormone levels change, your moods become a little bit less predictable. Almost like how you can almost liken it a little bit to like the like premenstrual syndrome, the PMS that you experience.
Yes, but it's just now constant.
And ramped up, sort of on steroids, essentially.
Yeah.
So I think they're subtle. The symptoms are subtle. It's things that you could attribute to stress. It's things that you could attribute to
you're not always connecting those dots. Because I remembered on my journey, there were a couple of symptoms that I thought was maybe post-COVID, or, you're sort of going, I had heart palpitations, and I had, all of a sudden I felt quite down, like quite depressed. And I know off the back of COVID, people were saying, you could have long COVID and it could affect your bit of your mental health. And I couldn't understand why I was just feeling so down. And I remembered going to a GP, and he was just like, well, maybe we should put you on an antidepressant. Maybe we should. And I was like, no, I don't feel like I should be on an antidepressant. I just don't know what's going on with me. And it was even something that I didn't realize, and only through my journey, that even my frozen shoulder was related to a lack of estrogen. So it is a roller coaster. As you were talking, I was like, I can relate. I think I had all those symptoms and not realizing that was what I was going through.
And another big thing is, as our estrogen declines, we also lose a bit of muscle mass.
Yes.
And traditionally, muscle maintenance, and that's not really something that women are taught to focus on, also when it comes to our exercise. So as one enters the perimenopause and menopause, you kind of need to look a little bit differently at everything,
Yes.
Metabolic, the way that our bodies process our blood sugar, and, sometimes one can become a little bit more insulin resistant. If you're already also perhaps already predisposed to that, putting you more, again, also at risk for diabetes, potentially. The way that your body, your metabolism slows down, you're losing muscle mass. So that also affects your metabolic rate. And, our musculoskeletal system, like I said, our muscles, everything, we have so many estrogen receptors. So it actually makes a lot of sense when you look at it that way, that a frozen shoulder might be a symptom of that as well. So yes, it's such a varied, and it can really affect every system. And it really does make sense if you think about, our hormones play such an integral role in our lives, in our health and our wellness. So when they start to change, of course it will have a knock-on effect.
Yes,
so it's actually quite logical, but we often don't put it together.
No, it sort of happens to us, and I do think that a lot of women feel quite dismissed in this time of life, because you've been getting on with it, so just get on with it, you know. And I think a lot of women find themselves at a time where their children are going through puberty. So you've got teenagers in the house. You are going through your sort of second, call it puberty. You are going through hormonal changes. And I think, why do you think it is that women feel this dismissed and not heard in this time?
I think it's because traditionally, medicine focuses is very much on, if your hormone levels look normal, then it's sort of, well, that's not the cause. So you sort of started to have a lack of self-trust. You lose a bit of trust in yourself, but you lose a bit of trust in the medical profession, because you're going for help and you're not finding it. And also to be told that your symptoms are sort of in your head, so, I mean, I'm a big champion for mental health, and, for mental illness is something that is very real, and I'm not at all opposed to antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication for when it's needed. But I also just don't think it's the solution to everything. If someone comes to you and says, my moods, I just don't feel like myself, my moods, I feel down, and then I feel this, and just say, well, you've got depression. It seems like that's a little bit dismissive of what's actually going on. People might have depression as well. It's not to say that they don't, but it's a little bit of it's almost like a
bit of a blanket approach.
Yeah, it's a blanket approach, and almost it in a way is a bit dismissive, because it's saying that what you're experiencing, I think what many women might hear when someone says it to them is like, well, it's in your head, you're imagining it, and it's not something, it's not medical. It's almost like it's saying it's psychological.
Yes.
Whereas it is medical, it's not there's psychological components to it, absolutely. But it's because of the underlying hormone issues that one is experiencing these things, not because you suddenly have developed depression out of the blue.
Yes, yeah. So, Michelle, I want to talk to you a little bit about Bloom and the Bloom philosophy. So when I look at your website, there are a couple of words: metabolism, gut health, hormones, menopause, weight, a whole bunch of things. And I'm quite interested in your philosophy and how that's all related.
Zoe, our bodies are so complex, and absolutely everything is connected. We can't look at our gut and our metabolism and our hormones in isolation. Everything is connected. Our gut health can impact our sleep. It can impact our metabolism. It can impact our weight. Just the same way that our guts and our skins are all colonized with microorganisms that are beneficial to us. They're also ones that can be a little bit more harmful, and if they outnumber the helpful ones, that's where illness and disease can originate from. So getting all of those things balanced and healthy really just goes a long way to actually correcting a lot of underlying things. And once one starts to correct one thing, you actually sometimes have knock-on effects, and we correct some of the other issues that we have as well. Our guts actually are full of nerve endings and glands that produce hormones that signal our brain after we've eaten to tell our brain, okay, I've now had enough food to eat. So absolutely everything is connected. So, we can't look at anything in isolation. And once we get all those things working optimally, that is when our bodies are in sync, and we can be on our way to optimal and good health.
So if I come to Bloom, what would your approach be? If I come and I come with a specific issue, and what would your approach be to helping me?
So at Bloom, what I like to do is that we start off with a detailed medical history. We do an examination, and then we follow that with appropriate laboratory tests if necessary. And what I like to do is we take a detailed history and allow, in our first consultation, which is 90 minutes long, allow you as the patient to tell me your story. And I can put all those things on a timeline, and we can sometimes use that timeline to see where things started. Because sometimes we think, we're tired, and we've got symptoms of brain fog, or we've started to gain weight, for example. When we put it onto the timeline, we can see maybe these things started around the time that a traumatic life event occurred. And sometimes, that takes us back to what kind of changed around that time in your life, and what can we focus on looking at to alter, to try and get you back on track for your health. What we then do is we also, once we've done any additional testing that we feel is necessary, we can come back for a second consultation, and we strategize, and we come up with a treatment plan together, because it's important for you as the patient to also set goals for yourself and to also play a very active role in your health journey. So what we then do is we will make a plan to address what we've identified as the priorities. Often, though, when we might say we're gonna look first at your metabolic health or your hormonal health. Under that, we will also then at the same time be addressing your gut and your weight and everything else that is of concern to you, because, as I said, all these things are connected, and ultimately what my hope is and what my goal is to walk a journey with my patient, so that it's not it's not there's no quick fix, unfortunately, and I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't promise that. But it's really more about a journey that we're walking on together to get you back and the patient back to their optimal health.
Okay, and I see you also, as part of your offering, you've got aesthetics in there. So, sometimes it could feel like a bit of a disconnect, metabolic health and then the outside, which could feel quite shallow. So talk to me about why aesthetics, why is that part of your offering, and what's your approach to that?
I absolutely love aesthetics. It's something that I've myself, I'm a frequent user of aesthetics procedures and products. And I've just always had an interest in knowing that's such a rapidly advancing field as well. There's constant new discoveries about how we can support our skin and how we can support our health. And our skin is our biggest organ. And so from my perspective, I ideally want to work from the inside out. Healthy body, healthy skin, and healthy skin isn't really a luxury. It should be a given. And once you are healthy, metabolically, hormonally, your skin often will follow that. And aesthetics is a way that one can help a woman to age the way she wants to. We don't have to. Sometimes people think of aging as you just have to accept it, and you have to age naturally or gracefully, however you want to term it. But you can age gracefully with a little bit of assistance, or without. It's completely up to you. And I think the journey is very individual. And I like to also work with the patient within their budget and with what their goals are, and whether that is that you'd like to have some collagen stimulators or skin boosters or neuromodulation. We can do all of those things, or we can look more at supplementation and other things that we can do, whatever your goals are. to reach those.
So I guess, how would you then, I mean, aesthetics feels like it's everywhere. I mean, I look at my Instagram feed and it just feels like there's lip fillers and Botox and, it seems to be the order of the day. How are you approaching that differently?
So the way I approach it differently is that, I like to work with each patient individually, whatever their goals might be. It's okay if you want to just come for an aesthetic treatment, that's fine. But ideally, it would be wonderful to be able to work with each patient on their overall health as well, so that we can optimize, diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, and that we can get to the bottom of whatever else is bothering her. And then we can approach that individually, tailored to her budget and her goals.
Yeah, I think that's great. Hey, that people they're empowered to decide what is their journey. And I love the fact that you are looking at things holistically. I know in my journey it was hard to find a doctor that one would give me the time of day to listen and just to be able to talk through how I'm feeling, where I'm at. And I guess at some point in a woman's journey, it's not so much about the outside anymore. You just know on the inside it's not working, and you're looking for answers. And I'm so glad that there's a doctor in my area that is listening to women and that is taking the time to walk a journey with people. I guess what I'm interested in is, how would you want your patients to feel once they've been to Bloom and they've spent time with you? What is that sort of feeling that you want to leave women with?
Ideally, I would want her to walk out of here feeling like she was heard, that someone understood her. And I'd like to also make sure that she feels that she now has a better understanding of what her symptoms are and what it could be causing them. And also just to make sure that she also knows that she's not going crazy. It's not all in her mind. That I really do understand, that I'm there myself and walking this journey with her. And that, she just feels like she can walk away almost feeling like she's made a new friend. And someone that really understands her and is with her on this journey.
That's great. So just to wrap things up a little bit, I know that you have a lot more information on specific topics like peptides and GLP-1 and Ozempics and all sorts. And I would love to spend some more time with you on more segments, just drilling into, the details around menopause, perimenopause, and all those hot topics that are out there at the moment. What would you tell that woman that's currently feeling disconnected from her own body? Her body is completely out of sync. What would you tell her, and what is the one thing she can do to take a step in the right direction?
So the first thing that I would like to tell her is that she must remember that she is not alone. She's not the only one going through this. Also that there is hope for her. There is something that can be done to help her start to feel like herself again. And a very important step that she can start to do very practically for herself today is she can start to speak and be kinder to herself. We tend to criticize ourselves very harshly. We are often our own worst critic, and our self-talk can be very negative. If we were to speak to ourselves, or someone would speak to our friends the way we speak to ourselves, we would be absolutely horrified. We would be so angry, but yet we tolerate that from ourselves, the things that we say to ourselves. And I think the best way to stop yourself from doing that is to picture yourself the way that you were when you were a little girl. So picture that little girl that you were in front of you when you look in the mirror, and speak to her the way that you wish that someone had spoken to you. And And I think, it's going to be very difficult to be nasty and critical to a little girl. So be that to yourself. Speak kindly and with love to yourself, because if you love yourself, then you will nourish yourself and you will look after yourself and you will prioritize yourself. And that, I think, is so powerful.
Yeah, I can't agree more. So we have a closing question on this LifeCast to all the guests. And the question is, what does living abundantly mean to you?
So for me, living abundantly means that one will live life up to the absolute full in every area of your life, whether that be your relationships, your career, your finances, and your health.
Yeah, gosh, it's not easy, hey? I think we live in such busy lives, but it's a good reminder. So thank you, Michelle, for spending time with me today. And to the audience, I want to invite you to go to bloomwellness.co.za. Go look at what Michelle's got to offer, make that appointment, and take that first step in getting your body back into sync. And yes, that brings us to the end of this segment. Thank you so much for spending time with us and with the Zoe LifeCast, where we look at ways to live life abundantly. Thank you so much.